If you like this podcast or the previous ones, please consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Frankies Pod. It just goes to help fund the software and the hosting. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Tonight I'm talking to Andrew Thurgood. Andrew joined the Paras before transferring to the RAMC. Now works for the NHS. Hi, Andrew. How are we doing?
Evening. Can I call you Frankie? Frank or E?
You can call me whatever you want. My name's actually Andrew, so there you go.
None of that.
Yeah. It's just one of the nicknames that just stuck. Somebody called me thinking it was Frankenstein, and I just went, well, actually, Frankenstein was the doctor, so you're a twat. The monster was called Adam, so yeah. But hey, it stuck, and even now, if anyone calls me Andrew, I have to shit.
Yeah, you get a bell again.
Yeah, it's either the police and my mum. My mum's dead, so it's normally the police.
Yeah.
Right, so okay. As for everybody else, it's just the 5 questions that we normally ask everybody. So it's, where did you grow up? Why did you join the military? What was it like? Why did you leave? And what have you done since? So if you just want to start up with where you grew up and why did you join the military?
Frankie, thank you for putting me in the right order, because if I'd got them in the wrong order, we would have had a very interesting podcast.
I'd have cut and edit it.
Exactly. Give you a bit of work to do, you loafer. Thank you for the invitation. It's quite embarrassing, isn't it, to sit in front of a camera and talk to people about you, about me. So, but I understand why you do it, and I take my hat off to what you've done over the past, mate. There's a lot of people learning a lot about others, which is really helpful, insightful. And hopefully with my experience, hopefully I'll share some stories that may chime with people and what they think and what they're doing now. So I grew up in the Midlands. I came from as most soldiers, a highly dysfunctional family. My mother and father met when they were young teenagers. My dad was in the Navy. My mum was a wren. The sun shone one night, and I was conceived.
As it happens.
1964, when they got married. I did go to the wedding. Read into that. Dad went away at sea a lot. He was on Invincible, Ark Royal, Hermes, Bulwark. He did all the big aircraft carriers. He was a Fleet Air Arm armourer. So he was away a lot, and Mum was at home with my kid, with us, myself, my brother Michael, and my little Mark. There was 3 of us at home at one point, and then things go on in families which are shit, but it doesn't get any more shit than your brother dying. So Michael and I were left alone when Mark died at 14 months, which then put extra pressure on Mum because she was dealing with the death of a child, a son, and there was just this spiral of alcoholism, depression, Dad not being at home. Life got more and more rocky in the house, and over the years, it just got very bad. And as I got to my sort of early teenage years, I needed something to steady my sort of ship, as it were. And what popped up, which I think was probably my saving grace, was the Army Cadets. So as a 12, 13-year-old lad, I joined the Army Cadets in Stafford. And all those dark things that were happening at home became irrelevant. I used to get fed. I was given clothes. I was go away on weekend camps. I'd get super fit. And then I started boxing as well. And all the bad things that were happening at home were being pushed to the side because I had other distractions. So I didn't have to be at home. And basically, the Army became an extension of that.
Did the guys who were running the cadets and also, like I said, the boxing gym and that, did they know what was going on at home?
I don't think they did, because in those days, we didn't have communications. We didn't have internet. We didn't have mobile phones. Or anything. People weren't as connected as they are now. So you were probably a little bit isolated. I used to turn up for boxing training. I'd work really hard, and that was what it was all about. You didn't look up on the internet about X, Y, and Z. You just did your boxing training and then ran back home again. Army cadets, I'd go away at the weekend and Mum would never hear from me from the Friday till the Sunday night. No telephones. So we, it was all quite separated. And long as you performed and long as you did your job in the Army cadets while you were boxing, you kept your nose clean and you carried on. It was successful. I did really well in the Army cadets. I became the champion Army cadet for the West Midlands in 1982, I think it was. And that's where they were saying, well, are you going to join the army? Are you going to join up? And I thought, well, I'd like to, but I realized that I wanted to trade.
Yeah.
So when I left school, I didn't have any O levels to shake about. So I went back to college at Stafford while I was in the Army Cadets and did my O levels in 2 years. Did some A levels as well, and then went to Bramcut Barracks to the Army Selection Centre, and did some training and assessment there. And they said, you've scored really highly on your intelligence test, which was a big shock to me because I was thick as hell. I thought I was thick, but compared to everybody else.
Just go Bramcut Barracks as in Nuneaton.
Yeah. That's what
as in the Junior Leaders Regiment, Royal Artillery.
Yeah.
I never knew they did selection there. Oh,
yeah, they did Army recruitment or selection. Whether it was a permanent thing or a temporary thing, I don't know. But I remember going down there.
I mean, I did mine at Sutton Coldfield.
Yeah, well, I ended up at Sutton Coldfield afterwards, and then when because I remember. See, I've got this vague overlap of memories, whether on the running aspect of either was it Lichfield or Sutton, I lapped everybody because I'm a boxing fitness.
Yeah.
So when it came to collating the intelligence tests and the fitness, they said, you're very clever, you're also very fit. Why don't you become a paratrooper? And I think, looking back at it, what they were doing is they were filling the spaces of the boys they'd lost down south.
I want to say that's like an oxymoron, isn't it? Like,
so
don't hate me, no haters.
No, you're all right. You're far away, mate. I'll hunt you down. So actually, I was totally blown away by somebody who'd actually thought they got faith in me. I could do something like this.
Yeah.
It was, the motivation it gave me was tremendous. That somebody had looked at this rag arse of a lad, skinny council house lad, and said, "You're actually quite fit, but you're also quite clever. Why didn't you join the Paras?" And the Paras, I'd always thought, but as a young Army cadet, they're the top of the tree, aren't they? The SAS and the Paras and the Marines. You think, wow, and then somebody's telling you can do it. So I put my papers in, and I went down to Aldershot. I turned up with a plastic bag, a black eye, and had a few bits of Dobie in this bag. I had nothing to bring as gifts or anything for my time at the depot. I was poor, I had nothing. But the black eye stood out because I'd had a fight on the Saturday before joining up. I won my fight, but I got a black eye. So I turned up at Aldershot Station with the full screws ready to pick you up as a recruit. They were going, aye, we've got one here.
Yeah.
Here's trouble. And you've got to try and be grey, haven't you? Keep out of the way. Nah. I stood out like a bulldog's bollock straight away. But had an absolute blast in the military. Depot was brutal. They'd all just come back from the Falklands, so they were all a bit unhinged.
Yeah.
And they took it out on the Crows. We had great soldier teachers, but God, they were brutal. Some of them were utter gentlemen, and those are the ones who generally didn't go down south. Going down south in 82, and then training in a depot 83. Didn't have time for decompression then. They were straight into, giving you a hard time. Don't do it like this at Warminster. You do it like this. Is how you do it in the battlefield. That was the sort of stuff that kept coming out over and over again. But what a great training we had. And I'm ever grateful for the foundations that they laid down on what I've done throughout my life. And I'm still in contact with some of the full screws who did my training. And I let them know that. At the time, you don't realise how important they are. But on reflection, you realise, yes, you really did stop me from going through the floor and made me have big steps going forward.
I mean, I was quite lucky in my training. I had 3 very good troop sergeants and a fantastic troop commander. ex-para commando. They were brilliant. And I've spoke to many people on the podcast who've had an abysmal time in training, especially with like some of the para guys who were on.
Yeah.
The depot was rough. Bullying.
Yeah.
I mean, we all say no, it's not bullying. It's just a bit of
Character building.
Character building. But it's when you look back and you diagnose it, you dissect it and think, yeah, not all of that was character building. Some of that was malicious.
Yeah.
That was down to the certain guy who was doing it, power hungry or whatever. But it did happen, and as much as looking back through rose tinted glasses, like I say, I was lucky. I never experienced any of it. We did know of guys in junior leaders who complained that they got bullied and stuff like that. There was, I would say, there was bullying within the troop, with each other. But again, I think that's just young men trying to find.
Yeah.
We were all 16-year-old when we joined, and we were just all trying to find like our level. I left Hartlepool and I didn't even know the places existed. And all of a sudden I'm listening to people with Brummie accents and I've got a fucking clue what they were saying, that type of thing. I mean, did you find that when the melting pot of turning up at depot with people from all over the different parts of the country, was there any friction? Or were you all just too knackered?
I think we were all too knackered. We were in survival mode. We very quickly turned into a scrum to look after each other. Anybody who was weak, the system got rid of them very quickly.
Yeah.
It was brutal. You'd wake up one day and there's a fucking empty bed space. He's been RTU'd. He's been kicked out. He's gone. You could see that they were chipping away at the group to get down to the people they really were interested in, wanted to invest in.
Yeah.
I remember in the very early days, I think it was week 2, I think it was. A lot of people hadn't got a clue what they were doing. I'd been in the Army Cadets, so I knew about uniform, I knew about inspections, I knew about, all that sort of stuff, albeit as in an Army Cadet, but at least it wasn't alien to me.
Yeah.
And I remember in the first couple of weeks, we got up in the morning for a block jobs, opened the window, and we looked across Basingstoke Canal. We looked a bit of a football field, and then the Basingstoke Canal was right against the perimeter fence of Depot Para. And I looked over and I said to one of the lads, "Is that a body over there?" He went, "What do you mean a body?" And they all got to the window. It was a fucking corpse laid at the side of the canal. And we were like, what is Aldershot like?
I mean, you shouldn't laugh, but yeah.
It was just coincidental. Somebody had gone for a run in the morning and died. But, for a young kid to look out the window and see a corpse, you go, are we really here? It's what it's like. But yeah, I think we were a very strong group. My boxing fitness helped me to float to the top on the physical exercise. I became P Company champion. And for a council lad who'd got no self-esteem at all, that was, I thought I'd won the lottery. Genuinely, I was at the top of the world, as it were. But that didn't matter. It was all about the good mates that you were with at the time. And we had such a laugh. I ended up going to battalion in jail because we'd passed out. We were in a holding platoon in depot waiting to go to the battalion. And of course, we were cutting about the lines with our wings up and a berry. We were big soldiers now, waiting to go up to the big battalions. We are it. All the crows in the depot thought you were God, so we were lapping this up. So we went down on the piss down in Aldershot, came back rolling drunk, got to our holding block, and one of the lads locked me out of my room. And we're, pissing at about 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm trying to get in my room. He's locked me out. So I kicked the door off its hinges. They're like kung fu. Just took it off the door. Boosh. As I was flying through the air, the corporal who worked in the stores in the corridor at the bottom looked up and saw me flying through the air, hitting the door with my boots. And the next day, I'm on the parade square, belt and berry off, being whipped into jail. So I get 7 days jail for malicious damage. And while I'm in jail, the lads go up to the battalion lines. So I'm now sitting in depot jail doing my time as a soldier under sentence. And the lads have gone up to the lines, up to the battalion, up to 3 para. The Sergeant Major is an old warhorse, a chap called Dave Fenwick, Sergeant Major Fenwick. He hears that one of his crows is in depot jail. So he sends down the company clerk to come and get me. So I'm dragged out of the jail, thrown into a short-base Land Rover and driven up the hill to the lines, straight into the Sergeant Major's office. And his nickname was the Aldershot Ape. Okay. So you can imagine what I was thinking. And the company clerk was winding me up. He was going, he's going to fucking kill you. He's going to tear you a new arse. You are going to die. And I got into his room. He shut the door behind me. He said, right, put your gum shield in, put your helmet on, dig in, and put in 12 inches of overhead cover because you're going to ride the wall of death with me. And he punched the shit out of me. And what he'd done is he commuted my remaining 3 or 4 days in jail into RPs so I could get out of jail because he'd punished me.
Yeah.
And that's how it was in battalion. And you wouldn't hear of that now.
No.
But I was delighted. I was delighted to be out of jail. I was back in the lines. So, I got a bit of a slap. And everything was fine from then.
So did you have a bit of, I mean, I was going to say, you may have had a bit of a reputation. The crow's gone to jail before I come here, but you're going to a para battalion. That's fuck all. You know what I mean?
No,
you're still a crow.
You're still absolutely a crow. And remember, all these lads were 90% of them Falklands veterans.
Yeah,
they'd just come back from the most brutal battlefield that you could ever imagine. And you know who went, but by the looks of their faces, the ones that didn't smile. When they were smiling, they were pissed and either beating somebody up or beating themselves up. There was just a theme within the battalion. They were all absolutely amazing characters, but fuck, it was brutal.
Yeah,
I've never been able to explain how hard it was to anybody who wasn't there. I've never had the words to put it across in a way that would justify it. The only people who know are the ones who actually were there at the time. There were people still walking around the lines with limbs missing, on crutches. They were still going through rehabilitation, and so the battle scars were still being lived in the battalion lines. And there were heroes. There were people there who'd got MMs, who'd got bloody, awards for bravery and doing all sorts of amazing things. They became legends within the battalion. And you were having scoff next to them in the cookhouse. And as a crow, you just think, oh my God, What on earth am I doing? So you had to work really hard. You had to stick to the rules to prove yourself because there was no inch for mistakes. I made a mistake once. I made quite a few really, but one that comes to mind. We were doing a live firing exercise in Wales. We were all formed up. It was going to be a huge company attack, live firing. And we were going to be the point section to go forward, lay down covering fire while somebody came in left or right flanking. So the SF was firing over our heads, live rounds. We were to crawl forward to the start point. And then when the rounds had gone in, we'd lob in the grenades, and then the left flanking attack would start. So I was given a couple of grenades. There's about 6 of us, and our job was to crawl forward to this line, throw the grenades, which would initiate the attack, and then all hell would break loose. So as a crow, I'm given this grenade, put it in my pouch, and I'm crawling forward. And there's a few DS in the background, obviously because it's live fire and there's a bit of control there. But it's dark, it's early morning and it's all going, a little bit sort of intense. So I reach down on my belly, blowing out my arse, and I lift my webbing pouch lid, and the grenade drops out and there's no pin. And I'm like, what the fuck? And in my head, I'm going, you can't see a pin. Because we're always taught, look at the pin, look at the pin. It says, I can't see a pin. So I look left and right very quickly. All the guys are scrambling around in their pouches, still getting out. So I've got this egg in my hand. So I thought, fuck this. And I shouted, grenade. And I threw it. And everyone dives for cover and nothing happens. So the grenade... So the grenade had unscrewed in the pouch. So all the firing mechanism was in my pouch, and the egg was in my hand. So I had not seen this pin, and just threw it because I was flapping. And one of the sergeant majors came up to me and kicked the shit out of me for being a dickhead, and we just carried on, and that was it. But for months and months afterwards, the ruthless banter would be they'd come into the block and they'd throw a tin into the room, a shout grenade. No, it's all right, it's Thurgood, it won't go off. It was relentless.
Did you get much like? All right, let's face it. When you got the battalion, was there much bullying? Because I've spoken to loads of lads who went to the Paras, and they said it was. I wouldn't say it was relentless, but I mean I know a couple of guys who joined the Paras in the late 70s, and they did not have a good time when they first got a battalion. They really, really didn't.
So, you made a point about they must have thought you were a bit of a lad player because you've come up in jail, reputation and all that. One of the things I had to do was to mill my best mate. So I had in the block there was 9 platoon on the bottom, 8, and then 7 at the top. 7 platoon. So 3 platoons in this block, and 7 platoon were a bit mad. I mean, proper mad. And I was in 9 platoon, and my mate he'd gone to 7 platoon. So we're both new lads in the block. And they all came back off the piss, and they said, right, we want you to mill him. So they dragged me out of bed. They're all pissed. And Muddy Waters, love him. He's a lovely, lovely guy. We have to fight each other. So we're in our skiddies, having to mill each other in the block. So I'm in the middle of the room, and they're all it's like gladiatorial pit.
Yeah.
And they said, they're all shouting and baying for blood and all the rest of it. So we're getting in the middle, and I said to Muddy, Muddy, I'll just hit you once, mate, and go down like a sack of shit. All right, I'll just hit you once, and I'll pull it, but just go for it. He went, all right, Andy. So we go to our corners. The bell rings, and we all start fighting. I move into the middle, and I throw just a quick jab, and it catches him on the forehead, but he doesn't move. So I throw him another one. He doesn't move again, and we're getting a bit of I said, Muddy, you're supposed to fucking go down. He says, but they've told me if I go down, they're going to kill me. I said, fuck it. So I hit him again. He throws a few swipes at me. The next thing I know, mate, I've been hit over the head with a bass broom. And I go down like a sack of shit. Because they've seen me, I'm a bit tasty. I'm on my feet, I'm doing the moves. And I get with this bass broom. And I got about a 2-inch cut on the top of my head. And I'm pouring with blood. And they stop the fight, and they're all cheering. And it's all, brilliant, fantastic, awesome. Out there are pictures of me and Muddy sat against the wall, covered in claret. And that was not unusual.
Yeah.
Is that bullying? How do you define bullying? It's a hard one, isn't it? Because it was just...
Yeah. I mean, I had a similar experience once. And I wouldn't... No, well, so what happened to me is I'd been Dick for guard. I was looking forward to going out on a piss. Being Dick for guard the next day, so I thought, I'll be good. I'm not going out on a piss, I'll go to my room. And in the block at the time, the battery bar was above, in top of the building, and it was above my room. And all I could hear was everyone up there, and I'm thinking, fucking wankers. I'm on guard tomorrow. The next thing I know, room door bursts open. A couple of lads run in and grab me, drag me upstairs, strip me naked, and then pushed me into the middle of this circle of people. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And there was a visiting rugby club from Barry called Barry Plastics. I'll always remember it. And they were all shouting sumo. And I was like, what's going on? And they just went, you're sumo in their scrum half. I was like, am I? I don't want to fucking get in there. And this thing come charging towards me. He was naked as well. I mean, I was like, fair enough. All friends together and that. And he just come charging at me, and I just thought, I'm not having this, and just swung for him and just knocked him flying, and then jumped on him and laid into him. And everyone thought it was hilarious. Consequently, I got took by the rugby club. I woke up in their temporary accommodation about 6 hours late for guard. But I mean, that's by the by. Again, 7 days, Nick. Nice one.
Yeah, nice one.
But I wouldn't call that bullying. even though technically it is. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, if I grabbed grabbed a soldier now and dragged him into a room and ripped his clothes off and threw him into a baying crowd, fucking hell.
It'll be all over the papers.
Yeah, I mean, but it was, you know, even you go to Nick and he was just laughing about it.
You know, battalion life was hard, but I've never laughed so much in my life since, and I've never created friends and bonds with people since those early days, and I look back with enormous fondness of the characters that I got to know in those days. Being fit as a flea, having a bit of money in your pocket, but being surrounded by good people who you could genuinely trust. Means the world. And you know, that's probably what every soldier wants to have. If they could have one wish, it would be to be around those people again and have the trust of someone looking after you if you were in a bit of trouble. And that's the golden thread that runs through every veteran, I think. And that's why these veteran clubs do well, because they reconnect again. And I think it's so important that veterans do reconnect, because it is out there. It just gets a bit frayed if you lose contact with people, but you can reconnect and, you know, reestablish them.
I mean, there's some people, you know, I've asked guys to come on the podcast and have, you know, flatly, refused. I've left the army. That part of my life's over. No more. You know, I'm happy where I'm at, and I'm like, you might regret saying that. You might regret feeling that way. I was like that when I left the military. That's it. Don't want anything, you know. But unbeknown to me, that was me going on a slippery slope down, because I turned into a bit of a recluse and stuff like this, because I never handled leaving the army. You know, there was no like so like I didn't have like a leave and do or anything like that. I just like went to go on garden leave and off you pop. And it just, I didn't have any closure. You know what I mean?
Brutal, that is.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's like there was no closure there, and I think probably again that's probably why I'm doing this shit, talking to lunatics online on a night. I'm not allowed to talk to other people. I'll get the police involved again. Cut. Don't put that in.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, because I knew that there would be one day when I would get out, and that's probably on the back of my hand, because before I joined the army, I was doing a pre-nursing course,
right,
at college. So it wasn't just doing O levels; it was actually pre-nursing. So I had that in my pocket, and then it got to a point in the battalion where I had to make a decision, and people started to say, "You're very fit and intelligent. How you thought about what you're going to do next? Are you going to do selection? Are you going to do this and this?" So I started to ramp up the soldiering side of things by doing sniper training. And as you know, sniper training is, I always like to describe it as like having an A level in soldiering. Yeah. You really have to be top of your game just as a soldier to be a good sniper. And then if you wanted to go down to Hereford, then you'd be doing a master's degree in soldiering. That's just an analogy I would use. So I'd started my A levels in soldiering and did my sniper training, did well, enjoyed that. But it was just something in the back of my mind. And there's a few medical incidents that happened in the battalion that reignited the desire to do something medical. One was in Belize, when one of the lads collapsed on a run. And my actions during that time medically saved him. There was a guy who got killed out in Belize, and it was very sad that he'd been shot on a start line and died on the Baldy Beacons. And it took a long time for the RAF to come out. That is interesting, because fast forward to when I've joined the medical corps, I'm now in that force hospital dealing with a soldier who's had a very similar injury, and we save him. This was a Belizean soldier who'd been shot. Yeah. He'd been flown out, and we'd saved him. So it was a bit of closure then. There was a very strange loop in your soldiering history, that you're out there and you hear of somebody dying on the ground, and then 4 or 5 years later, in the operating theatre dealing with somebody with the same injury. So transferring across was always about what would I do when I got out. And that medical footprint allowed me to take another step into the civilian life whilst having still the same skill I trained within the army.
Yeah.
Nursing is international. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity. But I wouldn't have become a nurse if I hadn't been a paratrooper.
So your choice to go with the medical corps, how did your friends in the battalion take that?
Well, a couple of incidents where I'd stepped forward and done the business and to put no gloss on it, really, to save some lives. That was recognised by the lads as something commendable. So they always knew I had something extra to give. I got anointed as the patrol medic for the tour in Belize. So, I was the medic out in the jungle. There was a few things that happened in the lines where I had to help medically. I got a CO's commendation for doing something on the train coming back from Waterloo to Aldershot. It was all coming together as this is the right thing, and it was just natural for me to do that. And they were all absolutely 100% behind it. My OC at the time, Major Gandel, he was very supportive. Wrote a wonderful reference letter for my interview. So without them, I wouldn't have launched into my nursing career. So it was the right thing to do at the right time. Was I sad? Even then, I think I started to miss the camaraderie of battalion life.
It's very different.
Oh, yeah. And all of a sudden, you're working around REMFs, hospital practice where you don't salute, you don't march, everyone's cutting around in the uniform, but it's just like civvies.
Yeah.
And it's very, very strange. So when I turned up, there were something like 60 QA nurses all sat in a 60 QA nurses all sat in an auditoria.
I've just had Terry Thomas pop in my head then. I don't know
what could possibly go wrong. And I was a trained soldier. I got my wings up. I got my, my PTI cross swords, and I walked in. They thought I was part of the staff. So I walk up to the back of this auditorium, sit down, hiding, absolutely shitting myself. And the matron comes in, she gives her talk, and the RSM comes in, gives his talk. And then the senior nurse tutor came in and gave her talk and introduced me. She said, "We're very grateful to have Private Thurgood here from the Parachute Regiment, who's transferred across to become a nurse." And of course, you've got all these young ladies just turning around looking up at this absolutely petrified young man at the top of the class. But even while I was doing my nurse training, I had to be at the top of the tree. Academically, I had to work really, really hard because it wasn't easy for me. But that regimental pride, that drive to be the best came out in my academic studies, and I was always competitive and wanted to work hard. So, I was reaping the rewards of that as the years went on, because, good work breeds good work. And that's a motto that I carry into my private practice, is that good work breeds good work.
So where did you do your training with the medics then?
So I trained at, so I went to Keogh Barracks initially to be ticked off as a CMT.
Yeah.
I had this interesting interaction with a QM who wanted to take my berry off me. He says, you need a black berry now. I says, you're not having this one. You can charge me for it. He says, get it off your head. I says, I'll get it off my head when I transfer. And that date is until January. And he looked at me and he knew I wasn't going to take any. So he just threw it at me. And I kept my maroon berry for a while. So there, I rebadged, having done my CMT 3. That was just a tick in the box because they wanted to have something out of me if I failed my nurse training. They could throw me onto a field ambulance or something. So I did that as a minimum requirement. And then I started at the Woolwich Barracks, the Woolwich Hospital, the QE, QMH, for the first 18 months. And then I transferred across to the Cambridge Military Hospital in Aldershot and finished my last 18 months there as a student nurse.
So you're back up in Aldershot then?
I was back home in Aldershot, and that was a really interesting time because the lads were still there, and I met them. And it's interesting that I'd been out of the battalion 18 months, 2 years, and they were talking a different language. The culture had moved on,
Right.
so it was very apparent that I wasn't part of that running pack. Whilst we were still mates and we recognised and said hello, the battalion life had moved on, and that for me meant that it just underlined the point that I was in a different part of my career now. I was an ex-paratrooper. I'm now in the Royal Army Medical Corps as a nurse. It was quite sad. I think it came to a head on Airborne Forces Day because I went down to see them, but I just didn't feel part of it.
Yeah, I'd get that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's hard to articulate, but I think you know what I mean.
No, I understand exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
So you're not part of that brotherhood anymore, type of thing.
No, that's right. Because battalion life molds you and has themes that change from month to month. Somebody's new in the circle to get the piss taken out of them, then you move to somebody else, then you move to something else, and those subjects change. And if you're not part of that running pack, you haven't got a clue what's going on. Yeah. So it all changes. And I think from those early days, I remembered the phrase, you don't go back. Because it's never the same. Don't ruin the memories that you had by going back and being miserable. There's nothing here now. And actually, that's not the point. You look back at memories. You can't go back. I used to go stand and you go look at the depot, and I could hear the voices. I could see the people running around. I could see all the events that had happened. I could see the place where I vomited on guard. I could see all that, but it was memories. Yeah. But if I looked at it in a different way, I'd say it's all gone. It's all missing now. That's not the way to look at it. So you don't go back.
I get that. That's a good way of doing it as well.
Yeah.
Because you can wallow in, almost self-pity.
Yeah.
Really. And you can that can cause its own issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm so blessed to be able to look back at all those memories. They are vivid. Some are fading because of age, but I've got photographs and I've conversations with people that keep things alive. But they are so important when you move forward. And when you said that people have left the army and that's it, they've drawn a line under it, I think they're losing out a lot, because if you don't keep your memories going and you don't look back with pride, you lose something really quite valuable.
Well, I did an interview with a guy who won the Queen's Gallantry Medal, and he became quite, and he won't mind me saying this because he mentions it in the podcast. He became quite disillusioned with the military while he was in it. People do. Not everyone's a lifer. Not everyone's caught in a pension trap and stays in for 27 years. He decided to leave, and I asked him about what's he done since, and does he keep in touch with people in veterans associations and stuff like that. And he had no interest whatsoever. Even almost being a superstar because he's won the medal type of thing. Which he was very humble. I'll give him his due. He was very, very humble about it. Says he didn't deserve it and stuff like that. But when you understand the story, he did. But I said to him, I've found that, and I think it's just, I don't know if there's been a study done, but I have read it somewhere, that people who do this, who leave the military or leave a part of their life behind and change totally, say, right, there's a line, drawn it there, not looking back, not going back, I'm going forward. Within 12 years, 10 to 12 years, it starts eating at them, and it's that period there for some reason that they start reminiscing, they start going back, and they want to get involved again. Because if they don't, it can cause issues. Yeah. And I think that's what happened with me. It was, I've been out 12 years now, and it was me missing, not knowing what I was missing, but because I'd drawn that line, and it was, I didn't go down to like Remembrance Sunday and stuff like that. I didn't rock up to this. I never went to reunions or anything like that. But now I am. I'm getting back in, like you say, that family, that little family that you've always had. But people do tend to call back into it, but it just takes time. And the ones who don't can end up having issues. And I warned them against it. I said, don't walk away from it, because part of you, even though you don't feel it now, and you're only a young man. I'm only a young man. Christ, I'm ancient now. You're only a young man. Don't just walk away from it, because it's still part of your life, and you need to have that somewhere in your psyche later on, because it'll help.
Do you know? I think that looking back, the system was probably guilty for creating this situation. What I mean by that is that when you were in the military, everybody else was a civvy, and it was a negative connotation.
Yeah.
So there was them and us. It wasn't until I'd been out for a few years that somebody said to me, when you realise that you're the abnormal person and everybody else is normal, you start to get a bit better and find life a bit easier. So I think there's a stigma about being a civvy, and a shame that comes from being a civvy, that you park your military stuff because that was all shiny and very proud of, and now you're a civvy and it's a different life. But actually, that's not the way to make the separation at all. I think you should bring your military with you into civilian life and wear it on your chest. I mean that as a metaphor.
Yeah.
And not to be ashamed of it. And those who give you a hard time in Civvy Street for being ex-military do it for all sorts of negative reasons, and recognise that is the case. They're insecure. They're sharp. They're embarrassed in front of somebody who's probably better than them. That they are inadequate. They've always wanted. You've heard it so many times. Well, I thought about joining the army, but I used to be in the Army Cadets, but so when they give you a hard time, it's because there's something wrong with them. It isn't you.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
And for many, many years, particularly in my nursing career, because I was so shiny, academically sharp, diligent, on the button, we were trained really well as Army nurses. We'd have inspections at the beginning of the shift. Our shoes had to be shiny. Our uniform was pressed. We'd inspected before we went on the ward. Our nails were looked at. We were sent out into the wards, and we just did our job as best as we possibly could. Taking that into the NHS, where people don't give a shit,
yeah,
you're going to rub up against individuals. It took me ages to work out or get over the fact that I work in emergency department in ED. Or A&E as it used to be called. It took me ages to work out there were people who had been in that department for 20 years. I'd never come across that before.
And they were just stagnated in there.
What have you done for 20 years? And, you've come from a background of richness and variety, different life exposures, and all sorts of lovely things that have formed you into the person you are now. And you're meeting somebody who's been in the same department for 20 years, 25 years. How on earth are you going to get on?
Yeah.
You're just going to rub.
But if someone's happy,
that's fine. But what I'm saying is the military guy comes with a flexibility and a zest to do things and challenge and be the best and do whatever they want to do and work really, really hard. Where somebody for 20 years is just plodding on, quite happy.
Yeah.
And that causes a rub, particularly against the military. Who think they're a bit lazy and, why aren't you doing this? Whenever you say, well, let's go and change this, you go, nah, we've done it for 10 years. We'll keep it like it is. That's frustrating.
The thing I found frustrating, and it took me, I had to change my attitude because I realised I was wrong. And it's more or less like what you were saying there. So I'd get asked to do something and I'd do it. I'd do it straight away. And they'd say, well, why have you done that? Well, because you asked me to do it. So I've done it. Well, but this needed doing as well. Yeah, but you asked me to do that. So I've done that. And then I'll go and do this. If you wouldn't have asked me if you didn't want to do it. So it gets done straight away. And I expected other people to do that as well. So if I asked somebody to do something, I expected, I'd walk away and come back and it'd be done. And it wasn't. And you were like, well, why haven't you done it? Because it'll be done tomorrow. Well, do it now. And it doesn't, that's not the way the world works. It works like that in the military, but it doesn't work like that outside of the military. I interviewed a guy called Tim Davies, ex-RAF Tornado instructor, and he said one of the things he found hard when he got out. You want to look him up on YouTube as well. Quite an interesting guy. Very interesting. One of the things he found was lateness and stuff like that, timekeeping. And I know the guys who've ended up going down some bad rabbit holes because of timekeeping, because they couldn't handle people being late.
No.
And then what he discovered was that, be late. It doesn't really fucking matter. No one's going to die. It's he sets his clock late, so he turns up 7. He was on purpose. He'd turn up 10 minutes late for a meeting, and I'd be fucking pulling. I haven't got any yet, but I'd be pulling it out.
5 minutes
that happened to me.
Yeah,
and he'd rock up, and still no one would be there. He'd be the first one, and he'd be like, "Doesn't matter. Just embrace the chaos."
Yeah.
And it takes guys like us. It's hard stuff like that, because it's been bred into you that much, 5 minutes before, and then you rock up 5 minutes before, and there's no one there. You think, where is everyone?
I think
it doesn't hurt. The world's not going to stop.
Going back to battalion life and generally being in the military, having those groups of people around you you can trust, you can lean into, who genuinely are by your side and would lay down their life for you. That sounds very melodramatic, but that was the game. I knew that if I looked left and right on the start line, those guys would still be there in the firefight as we went forward, and they knew I'd still go as well. All right, and there's just something about that. My biggest shock for me when I left the army and started working in the NHS was to meet people who blatantly lie.
Yeah.
I found that horrifying. I could not believe. I know we've met liars and but I hadn't seen people lie so overtly to protect their own skin as I had done in the NHS, and it was a shock to me. And I even the fact of calling them a liar in a meeting had no effect on them at all. And I found, because that's probably a rub against everything you've gone for before, where is trust, honesty, openness, working as a team, and then to find somebody who's the antithesis to that, which is I will lie to protect my own interests.
Yeah,
and fuck you if it happens to you.
I do agree. And when I came across it, I found it quite hard not to turn into military mode and rip the heads off, because you're not allowed to do that either, apparently.
No, you can't. No.
Yeah.
Drying room.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did have to shout at one young lad once, and he put his notice in a week later. I mean, fucking tough.
It did its job then, didn't it?
Well, the way I've always discovered, I teach my grandkids this, and the young lads who work with us now, I said, look, if you ever fuck up, admit it. Just, you don't have to put your hand up and say, I broke this. Sit first, if you can. But don't be afraid to say, I fucked up. Or admit, if someone, why has this happened? Oh, I did that. I always found in the military, when I screwed up or got into trouble, I always admitted what I did. And 9 times out of 10, people aren't prepared for that. And they go, and you get away with it. You know what I mean? Loads of times, something had happened, like in a mess or whatever like that, and I'd go the day after and go, yeah, that was me. I've come to fix it. I've come to put the door back on or fix the window or whatever. And it was just like, yeah, right, okay. But be honest. The world's not going to end. As long as you're not going to go to jail for it, then
Do you remember? Do you remember when the cruise missiles came in to Greenham Common?
Yeah,
remember that. So it was over Christmas time. We got dicked for Christmas duty to protect Greenham Common. I remember it was all covered by the CND, and they were all around the perimeter fence, shining mirrors on the inside to reflect the devils and the evilness that was coming out of the base back into the base. It was, it was all that silliness. And we were basically around the perimeter, 25 meters apart, one bloke staggering on, looking at a piece of fence. Each had a radio set, each had a call sign, and it was just miserable. And because when the troops are bored, what do the troops do? So one of the lads piped up. Remember, each section of fence was coloured. Hello, green. This is blue. I've got a blue send over. Green, we've got a cat in my location over. Green acknowledged. And then this cat would go along the colours. Notice the colours. The OC was listening in at the net at the time. And he was getting pissed off. So he says, all call signs, will you stick to correct VP? Out. And then all you hear is, ooh. And of course, there's no way of tracing where that's come from.
No.
And all hell broke loose, and we were all on parade the next day and nobody owned up. And he was threatening to cancel Christmas leave, send us back on the wire. It was really, really, who blinked first? When he blinked and he let us all go and leave, but he was not happy. So there's some times when you don't own up.
Yeah.
And we all know who it was. So
when you were in the medics with the army, when you were a nurse in the army, did you go on any tours or anything like that with them?
Well, it's funny. It's not a tour. When I went back to Belize, so the Gulf War was brewing, and I was skimmed off from the hospital as being what the Cat 1 or first wave to go into Saudi Arabia. Now that meant immunisations, that meant a kit, that training, and various other things. So I was spun up, and so if the hospital was to be deployed, I would be on the first wave out. So it was all getting quite exciting. And are we going to go? Are we not? On the bus, off the bus, all that sort of stuff. It was quite early days. So because of my Cat 1 status, I was at the top of the pile, ready to be deployed. Back on a normal tour in Belize, there was a field surgical team plodding away, and there was a nurse working with the field surgical team who cocked up clinically. I shan't go into the details, but the fourth medical officer in Belize demanded that this individual was removed from the country very, very quickly, and he was replaced. So the only person they had with the capability to go out at short notice was me. So I was called into the matron's office, and he says, Thurgood. Yes, sir. You've been to Belize, haven't you, young man? Yes, sir. 1984, 3 para. Do you want to go again? I went, oh, no, sir. It was no, it was an awful place. He says, I thought you'd say that. You're a bit Brize and Norton on Monday. This is the Thursday or Friday. I went, what do you mean, sir? He says, you're going to Belize. And I looked at him, and I was looking around, looking for the the rubber dick to come running out, saying, I've got you. And it wasn't. So I was out on Belize, flown out. And that took me away from the hospital, who were sent to the Gulf. I was in Belize working with the field surgical team, and the stuff that we got up to there was just amazing. Amazing stuff. Just like MASH off telly, we all got. There was it was like that. It was mad. So we had a surgeon, Gavin. We had Mark, who was the anaesthetist. We had Mick, who was a theatre technician. Another theatre technician, and a lab tech guy. Of most of us, 90% of us had our wings up, so they'd already been part of Parachute Field Ambulance, or like me, I'd been in the battalion. So we all had our wings up. So we were quite a special field surgical team. We had a camaraderie, which was quite nice. And basically, we just did all sorts of weird operations in the jungle. We did it in people's houses. We did it in the hospital. And we did some really, really important stuff to look after the force out there. Soldiers that had spanked themselves into Land Rovers and smashed their face in and became blind. I remember that poor lad coming in. We looked after him and got him off to Miami alive. A guy got bitten by a snake, a fer-de-lance, and nearly died in front of us from the toxic effects of the fer-de-lance. We got him out of the hospital alive to Florida. There's I could just realise we had a patient die. So we put him in the mortuary. We'd operated on the person for cancer and they didn't wake up, which was an expected outcome, but it was a risk. Do the operation or die. So she elected to have it done and she didn't wake up, bless her. So put her into the morgue, which was only 2 fridges. And in Belize, these fridges have to work very hard, as you can imagine, because it's very hot. And then we get a pallet of papaya fruit as a gift from this guy who we'd looked after, who'd crashed his car and broken his ribs. So a few weeks later, he sends us this big crate of papayas, and the only place we could put them is in the fridge. So there's this lady on the top with a box of papayas underneath her to keep them cool. You're like, oh, can you get away with all this? And there's hundreds of stories that come out from that field surgical team. But we watched the Gulf War, unfold on CNN. And that was hard because my hospital that I'd been Cat 1 for was now in the Gulf.
Yeah.
And I was snagging on in Belize. But we did more medically in Belize than if we did gone to the Gulf because there wasn't actually a lot of stuff going on in the Gulf. So that was the only tour I did, which was Belize. But it was very, very good. I mean, the story I was saving up for tonight, you'll like this one.
Go on.
And it relates to the field.
Comfy.
So you get comfy, pull up a sandbag. So the field surgical team was a small, potent medical capability to look after the British forces in Belize. And our job was to be the frontline emergency response and the surgical capability to stabilize and get people out if they'd been injured. Okay. So we were like really important in the battalion, in the structure. So much so that we never got guard duties. We never got extra duty. We never got anything like that. We were left well alone by the garrison because we were so important. We were always on call.
Yeah.
A helicopter would fly in. We'd be running to the hospital to receive the casualty. It was proper MASH stuff. So there was a respect that we had that everyone else didn't have. They just looked after the medics. And, this was shown once to me when the uniform we wore was white, a white shirt, white trousers, black shoes, tropic nursing uniform, basically. And when I walked into the other ranks mess, they would always make me go to the front. The lads would always push you forward to the front to look after you. And I used to find that incredibly moving.
Yeah.
And just so respectful because they knew the job you did. It wasn't about getting any favours or anything like that. They were just genuinely looking after you because they knew what you did and you were their last line of defence.
Yeah.
So anyway, this garrison had a garrison sergeant major who was from the Hampshire Regiment. And he was new in post and he was being a bit of a twat. He was like, you know what they're like when they arrive in their garrison. They start to swing it a bit, don't they, for a while. And we just kept out of the way. And there was this big force exercise being planned. And we were saying that we can't be part of the force exercise because when you have an incident on the force exercise, we're it. We can't be out on the area. We have to, be where we need to be doing our job in the hospital, where the operating theatre is. He didn't quite get that. So he was pushing and pushing, and the anaesthetist and the surgeon, who were both captains, were pushing back on this request for the field surgical team to go out. And he got really quite pissed off. And he started giving us a hard time. He started giving the officers a hard time, which is not what you want to be doing. So Gavin, the surgeon, said, Andy, I think what we should do is we should invite him into an operating theatre list so he can see us in action. And I said, I'm a Lance Jack. I was like, right, okay. He said, I think it'd be good for him to know what we get up to. Give him a bit of perspective. Okay. So I was the link man between the RSM, the GSM, and the coming to visit us. So this is all pre-exercise. It was all about getting him to understand what we do. So he turns up in the morning, and I'm in my operating theatre blues with a cap on and a mask around my neck. And I said, "Good morning." I meet him in reception. I said, "Good morning, sir. My name's Corporal Thurgood. I'm be looking after you in theatre today. Have you ever been in an operating theatre?" And he looked at me like I'd got two heads. He said, "What on earth are you talking about?" I said, "Well, the operating theatre, it's a strange environment. If you've never been in one before, sometimes it can be a bit..." And he just looked at me and went, "You utter dickhead. I'm an RSM. I'm from the Hampshire Regiment. I've been to multiple tours of Northern Ireland, and I've done X, Y, and he started reeling off this military CV while I'm stood there going, oh, shit. And he's really swinging it. And I said, "Okay, sir, thank you." So I took him into the operating theatre, into the scrub-up room, gave him a theatre blues, gave him a mask and a hat, a theatre cap. And I said, "Sir, what we'll be doing today is we're doing an amputation of an old lady's leg. She's got diabetes and she's got gangrenous foot, and we need to do a baloney amputation. So you've got something really interesting to see today." And he went, "Look, are you trying to scare me or something?" I went, No, sir. I'm just telling you what there is." So I can hear next door the anaesthetic team, which is Mark and the theatre section, theatre OTT, dealing with the patient. So I go into the anaesthetic. I said, the RSM's here. He says, "Oh, do take him in, Corporal Thurgood, and then scrub up, because I'm scrubbing to help with the operation." Okay. So I take the RSM into the theatre, and it's all cool, it's air conditioned, it's crisp, it's bright, it's spanking clean, it's lovely. And he stood there, and he's got no clue what's going on. I said, "Sir, stand there, and the theatre team will be in with you shortly." So we wheel in this lady who's now had an anaesthetic. She's got her foot wrapped up because it's stinky and black and horrible. And Gavin comes in as a surgeon with his hands clasped like this. "Hello, RSM, nice to see you again." And a little bit of banter. So we're going to do an amputation today. And this RSM went, yes, one of your boys has just told me about what's going on. Batting it off.
Yeah.
So patient is on the table. Everything's sorted out. She's pain-free. Leg goes up. Gavin gets the India ink around her calf, draws where he's going to do the incision, and then looks at me. The cuff goes onto the leg, cuff up, diathermy on pedal by the right foot, and is all set to go. And he looks at me. I said, "Are you ready, Corporal Thurgood?" I said, "Yes, sir, I am. Equipment's ready," because I'm doing the operating equipment as well. He said, "Should we get the RSM to help us?" I said, I look at Gavin and I go, "What a good idea." So RSM, and he comes to the bottom of the table, and Gavin lifts the leg up, okay, and he says, "Would you like to hold the leg in this position for me, RSM?" So now he's got this leg held like this, and his job is just to hold it while the incision is made, okay? So the incision goes around the leg, down to muscle, down to fascia, down to the bone, and the last thing to be done is to saw the bone, okay?
Oh, I can feel it.
So Gavin looks at me, gives me a little wink. I go, because I know what's coming. So Gavin's now sawing away with his wire, all right? And then he does a little bit of cutting again. And then it gets to a point where the bone gets cut and the leg falls away into the RSM's arms. And he's like, whoa. Now, not many people actually feel the weight of a leg, but it's fucking heavy. So this RSM is like wobbling, looking at his leg, and he flakes. He faints.
I'm not surprised.
Piles in. Somewhere, and I cannot confirm or deny, there is a picture of him with his leg across his chest, unconscious, on the operating theatre floor, having flaked because of the impact of holding someone's leg. He never gave us a hard time after that.
Funny that, isn't it?
No. He was a very nice man afterwards. Looked after us very well. Totally respectful what we did.
I mean, you can understand where he was coming from, because I'd have been the same. You see medics and stuff like that. I mean, I don't have much experience with medics or anything like that, apart from in 1995, we got attached to 19 Regiment. We were supposed to be going there as signallers. And when we got there, they went, right, there's your ambulances. And we were like, what? There's your ambulance, your ambulance commanders. We were like, what? What's that? And we got attached to well, it was the RAP. But it grew and grew and grew. And we were attached to a French field hospital up on Mount Igman. And so we were ambulance commanders, we had drivers, and we had CMTs in the back and stuff like that. And I found it amazing. I really did. One, that it was very different to what I was used to, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The structure. Like the guy, the doctor in charge, he was a major at the time, but got promoted to lieutenant colonel when he was out there. A guy called Ross Walker. He used to teach interns at Guy's Hospital. So he got lost a finger, so he couldn't become a surgeon. So he was quite pissed off about that. I'll always remember that. We used to play charades. Always try to pick something with 10 words, and he hated it for that. He was a very interesting fellow, though. Very, very mad. And one day, the closest I've ever come to anything like that was the Dutch Marines had brought in a guy who'd stood on a mine and lost his foot, but it was just held on by tendons. So the doctor said, right, everybody get round. What? So all those artillery lads go, what are we doing? And he's like, all right, we're going to show you what we do. And we're like, fucking bloke's got his foot hanging off. I don't want to watch that. And he's like, just talk to him, because he was still awake, this guy, you know. One of the lads, Mitzi, held this guy's hand, and the only thing we could do was count to 10 in Serbo-Croat. Right? And this bloke's laid there and shot, look at it. Fitzy's holding his hand, counting to 10 in Serbo-Croat. And this bloke's like looking at the doctor, looking at him. He must have been thinking, what the fuck's going on? Why is he counting to 10? Because the doc's holding his leg with a pair of scissors in his hand. And went, oh, we'll just cut it. Dink. Right on the stroke of 10. So I was like, fucking hell. Put it in a bin bag on his chest, stitched him up. Right, ship him out. We don't want him. You know, we were just like, what is going on? But it was I think he just snipped it off. You know, he stitched all the, you know, everything up and stuff like that, all the bleeds and everything. And it was amazing. It really was. I almost, when I got back from that tour, contemplated putting in for a transfer, but realised that I'm not clever enough. So it was probably not a good thing to do.
It'd be funny if the RSM or the ex-RSM of the Hampshires at the time watches this.
And he admits that it was him. Yeah.
Well, he won't remember much, will he? Because he was unconscious.
Oh, bless him. But I mean, it just shows that, I mean, with not having the experience of, I mean, you'd had experience of normal army life, of green, let's say, let's call it white for the medics, or whatever you want to call it that way, you know, the nurses, the QAs and stuff like that. Very, very different type of army. And we would look at them thinking, they're doing fuck all.
Yeah.
This is probably a bad analogy, but it's the only one I've got. So I work in IT at the moment, all right? And if it's a quiet day for me, it's good, because I've been doing my job.
Yeah.
If I'm not doing my job, it gets busy. People ring in and say things are broken, this, that, and the other. So I wouldn't liken an IT guy to a medic, but you don't want an IT guy to be busy because things are broke. You don't want a medic to be busy because things have gone south.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
It's bad, but people don't see it that way. They just look, they're sat there doing fuck all. Well, they're not doing fuck all. You know what I mean, type of thing.
I mean, there's loads of stories. I'm just trying to think of one a quickie that's quite funny. One of the I'm chuckling. I even know the ending. One of the big time things we used to do was to fly out into remote areas of Belize and take an operating theatre with us and a capability to operate. And we would do it in a field or in a house. And one of the jobs that we did was to fly out on a Puma, proper alley, you know, with a theatre kit, all the boxes all packed up, and set up an operating theatre in someone's kitchen. Okay. And we got used to this idea of having guests to watch what we did because it would curry favour. Like if you brought the RAF helicopter pilots in, they'd take you out to the Keys.
Yeah.
Because they got to know you. There's a bit of backwards and forwards bartering going on. So you invite people. And one of the guests on the particular trip out to the jungle was a couple of SAS lads who were in the trees, and they just wanted to come and see what the field surgical team did. And of course, they see me as the nurse, as the handbag, as the limp-wristed, bloody fudge packing, whatever. Completely wrong idea of what it all is, but that's the stereotypes. So they'd give me an hard time, and the banter would flow, and it'd be all right. So they would take the piss, and I'd take it. I'm quite happy with that. We get out into the jungle. We do this operation, and the operation we're going to do is a sterilisation of one of the women who's had so many babies. So she's elected to have a sterilisation in a kitchen. So she's, I might be wrong by the recall, but she's something like got 14 children, and she's a Mennonite woman who doesn't want any more kids. So we've offered to sterilize her to stop her having babies, and she says, "Yeah, okay, I'll do that in my kitchen." So I scrub up in the operating in the kitchen, in the kitchen sink. We've got no theatre kit on. We're all skinned from the waist up. We're all naked, okay, because it's so hot. We've got theatre gloves on and a mask, so it's proper stupid. And I'm laying up all the kit for the operation. The anaesthetist is putting the woman to sleep. And what you need to understand is before you be sterilised, you have to have an empty bladder, because the bladder distends the anatomy, and you don't want to open the belly and then get the bladder in the way and cause an injury to the bladder with the knife. So you decompress the bladder, and you do that by catheterising. Okay. So I'd got these two SAS lads behind me taking the piss, and I'd just finished laying up, and Gavin, the surgeon, said, "Corporal Thurgood, do you mind decompressing the bladder, please?" And as a nurse, catheterisation is one of the skills, and I said, "Of course, sir." So I get this young lady who's on the bed, unconscious, and I open her legs. I splay it all open so I can see the anatomy, so I can catheterise. I take the catheter out of its bag, and I just part the anatomy so I can see the opening, and I slide in the catheter and decompress the bladder so the urine flows out, okay? And I look behind me, and the boys are going, "You jammy bastard." And all of a sudden, I had this massive respect. They'd been in the trees for months, and all of a sudden they're seeing this in front of them. So, but yeah, there's lots of little things like that, and that's army life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everything's
going to be. There's funny things in everything, and you can remember them. Yeah.
Yeah, there is funny, and there's sad times, and there's funny times. The lad who took my place in the battalion, they went to Ireland, and I didn't go. I elected to stay in UK to push my transfer through. They went to Cyprus, came back from Cyprus, and they went straight to Ireland. He was blown up on Mayo Bridge.
Yeah.
A chap called Steve Wilson, God bless him. And Steve was such a funny guy. He would always have us crying, laughing in the block because he was such a funny bloke. And when he was blown up, that just sent ripples through the whole military community. And I felt it even now as a medic, as a nurse. And it was very, very moving. And I went to his funeral in Hereford, and all the lads there, some of the lads had come back from Ireland to bury four or five of them around the country. So this was the last funerals. They were pretty maxed out with having done all the carrying of the coffins. And I remember being there thinking, shit, this is so far away from what I'm doing now. And I felt slightly guilty because I was not there or not part of it.
Yeah.
But what it did teach me is that life carries on. If you change and do something else, life carries on. The regiment doesn't stop. Activity in the lines doesn't stop. The banter doesn't stop. You're just in a different space, and not to feel guilty about it. It was quite important to feel like that. So fast forward 20 years, I'm in the hedgerow of an estate in Hereford, and I'm doing a counter-terrorism training exercise for the police. And we need to be able to create casualties for this scenario. And one of the scenarios is that the roadblock has been hit by a car, escaping car, and one of the officers has an amputation. And my job as the medic running all this is to find somebody who could be an amputee for us. So I put a message out, and this guy pops up who'd volunteered to do it. So I meet him on the day, shake his hand, and he lost his leg in Afghanistan. And we were chatting away on this like immaculate green piece of grass in this estate. And I'm just, chatting about his military experience. And he asked me what I did and where I was. And I said I was in 3 Para. Now I'm a nurse and I do this and this. He says, oh, my dad was in 3 Para. I said, oh, who's your dad then? He said, Steve Wilson. And this pin dropped. I said, Steve Wilson, who's blown up on Mayo Bridge. He went, yeah, that's my dad.
Wow.
Went, fuck me. I'm now stood 20 years later in front of his son, Matt Wilson, who got blown up in Afghanistan. And, I've kept very close to Matt since.
Yeah.
He came to my 60th. I've looked, I've been around him when he's been in trouble, looked after him. And he's such a nice guy, such a good guy. But isn't it strange how big circles can close in like that after 20 years? Yeah. I didn't know Steve had a son.
That's crazy.
That's nuts.
I mean, you could say karma, this, that, and the other, but it's just mad, isn't it? It's just like the universe.
I know. And going back to what we were saying earlier on, if I'd drawn a line through my military career and turned off completely, I would never have had that special moment 20 years later.
No, you wouldn't.
You don't know how it's going to ping up and just flash something positive in front of you in your life. It could be a nice quiet handshake in a pub with somebody who recognises you because you're in trouble and they're there to help you. But if you've turned everything off, you don't have that opportunity present itself.
No.
So Steve had a son, Matthew. Matthew was blown up, lost his leg. We're still in contact. Like I say, he's a good lad. He's had dark times himself. He's had his real struggles, obviously, from losing his dad, and he's got a Facebook presence. But somebody posted a video of his funeral, and I didn't know that the funeral had been filmed by the British Forces film, wherever it was at the time, news service.
Right.
And my face appears on the film. And I'm like, shit. It was a real shock.
Yeah.
It was like a time warp back 20 years to the funeral in Whittington, just outside Hereford. And there I was. And it all came flooding back. So memories are really important because they are the fabric that give you that your character sits against. If you've got no memories, you can't form character.
Yeah, that's a good way. It's a good way of putting it, actually, when you think about it.
I don't think that's written down anywhere. I've just made that up.
Yeah, I'm going to nick it.
You can have that, mate. You can have that. Because
that'll be the podcast tag. I'd tell you what, that's not a bad tagline. That
it's not, is it? It's not.
Mine's uncorking the unforgettable. But,
yeah.
Mine goes. It's a similar thing, but it involves alcohol.
So
what made you leave the military then?
To be honest, I think I was hurt by not being sent out to the Gulf.
Right.
Because of my regimental background. I felt part of a unit and I'd been taken away from it, even though my Belize experience was vibrant. The best days of your life, really, to be honest, to do the things that we got up to. I was hurt by that, and I'd made a decision that I wanted to specialise in emergency medicine, in ED. And I managed to get hold of a training course at the Royal London in Whitechapel, which is a very, very busy inner city emergency department, highly respected. And what was special about the course is it was unfunded, so I didn't have to be part of an NHS hospital system to get an access to the course. So somebody was going to fund me to do it, but I didn't have to be part of a health authority.
Yeah.
and they were becoming like as rare as chicken's teeth. So I managed to get an unfunded ED course at the Royal London. So I took the job. So I went for it. Left. I turned down commission. I had a conversation with the senior nurse tutor at the time, a chap called Malcolm Bell. Was it Bell or Bellwood? And he said, look, if you stay in, you are very likely to be in 10, 15 years' time the Director of Nursing Services, or DANS as they call it, Director. I just thought he'd blow smoke up my arse to keep me in. But looking back, he probably was right. I probably would have carried on and plodded on, because the people I've seen who've stayed in, they've done very well. And I was fucking better than them.
That's where I thought you were going to
go. Well, you all do, don't you? You've got to have some confidence.
Yeah.
But going back to that point, I did turn down commission, because what you did in the old days is you trained as a nurse, you qualified, and you had to do 2 years post-registration before you could commission.
Yeah.
The irony was that if you were an NHS nurse and just qualified, you can come straight in as a lieutenant, second lieutenant.
Yeah.
So you had people who've been in the army for a couple of years who were a bit rounded off. They've probably done 5 years in total because of the 3 years training, know the system inside and out, but they've been told what to do by somebody who's only been in a month.
And that could be a bit grinding, I'd imagine.
It was interesting. So I left, specialised in emergency medicine, and had a very busy career, 30 years now, probably as a nurse in the NHS and private sector. And now I work across a whole range of different specialities. I'm the head of governance for the BBC, for CNN, a medical director for West Midlands Fire Service. I run 3 or 4 firearms units across the country for their clinical governance. City London Police, West Mercia, Warwickshire and West Midlands. West Midlands being the second biggest metropolitan firearms unit, second or third.
So what does that entail? Because I'm a bit like, what the fuck are you on about?
So police officers have a medical capability. It all goes back to the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, where they found that the officers who attended poor Stephen, who was dying in the street, didn't have any medical capability at all. And they were quite critical of that. So there was this uplift, this pressure to have officers trained in some medical capability. At around that time of that recommendation, I was asked to go and do a presentation to the rapid intervention course for the police firearms unit. So the boys who are trained to blow windows out and blow doors off and blow through the floors and things. So the rapid intervention course has been run, the national course was being run at West Mids. And one of the lads asked me, would I do a presentation on what a police officer, a firearms police officer, medical capability should look like? What skills does he need to have? Because at the moment, all they were doing was first aid at work, which is about as much use as sights on the Thunderflash. So all it is, knocked together a little presentation for about an hour on what a medic would do in the military, turned it into a sort of civilian speak and presented that. Afterwards, they came up and said, we want to do this. So I put together a program, went to a few medical colleagues who said, yep, we'll run with this. And we set up a course called Fast Aid, which does exactly what it says on the tin. So police officers have been trained how to look after themselves if they were injured in a therapeutic vacuum. And this Fast Aid course got interested by Warwickshire, West Mercia, West Mids, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, Manchester counter-terrorism teams. And we realised that actually the best way to impact the system would be to offer it out for free as a national standard. So we approached the Association of Police Officers at the time, offered it forward, and they adopted it, and it became what's called D13. So D13 is part of the medical training that every firearms officer has to have for his ticket to be active. So they have to have D13, and that standard is what I assess and ensure is being delivered when I do my clinical governance oversight of the organisation. I'll also act as their subject matter expertise when things go wrong or something goes stage left and they're not quite sure what should have happened. I'll come in and give some steer and guidance on what to do. So it's really quite interesting because the boys and girls in the firearms units are up for it.
Yeah.
Really, they really are awesome at the medicine. And some of the stuff that they get up to now is, awe-inspiring. So they have a duty to save life, but also if they've shot somebody, they have a duty to treat them. So they might do something to stop somebody, but then they will go straight into having done the policing to try and save the person's life.
At the moment, there's the old is it Chris Kebab? I can't remember his name. The firearms guy's just been found not guilty. It must be hard for them, really, knowing they have to go out and do this job, and it feels as though they haven't got the backing of the hierarchy of the government or whatever. I mean, without getting political about it or anything like that, I suppose it's like when we've been out to places like Northern Ireland and stuff, and you're scared to react in case you end up in a shit. I mean, I know guys, I've spoken to guys who were out in Afghan, and they got to the point later on towards the later Herricks where they were scared to return fire in case they got in the shit, in case they got took to court and stuff like this. And I think a lot of, the perception is at the moment that the firearms guys and girls as well are under that assumption that they're worried. Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not. I think it's just
the ones I've seen,
the way we think about it.
The ones I've seen, and I've seen a good number over the years, have been incredibly well trained and professional. I mean, they do remind me of battalion life sometimes.
Yeah,
because the can-do attitude and the professionalism and the way that they will punch forward and do the job. That's why I like working with them, because they chime with what interests me, what I like to see in individuals. I do a very similar thing for fire services as well. So I look after the medical capability for Hereford and Worcester Fire Service, West Midlands, and Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service. And again, highly professional, diligent, want to help, but they work in a different space.
Yeah,
police officers are very police actions, tactics first, medicine afterwards, whereas the firefighter will generally be straight onto the medicine quite quickly because of the numbers that will turn up, generally speaking. And they have a duty to respond to rescue, whereas a police officer's first duty is to be a policeman first.
Yeah, which is understandable.
Yeah. And one of the challenges that I have with the training is to make sure that they do the policing first and don't get seduced by the medicine. They often will forget the tactic side of things and, start treating somebody who's in trouble and there's somebody behind the door with a gun or a knife. I mean, that doesn't happen, but I'm giving you an idea of what could potentially happen if they don't train properly.
You never know what's going to happen, do you? Really?
No. So, I have the utmost respect for them, for what they do. They do work very, very hard. And it's interesting, you do have different flavours of firearms units as well. So a firearms unit, say, within West Mids, they're on the plate every day. They're working really hard because Birmingham's busy. You move across to Warwickshire, who have a very different profile of activity.
Yeah.
Still highly professional and top draw, but different culture because there is more rural, long chase. But they do have their hot spots, within the Warwickshire conurbations. But it's different to West Mids. So it's quite nice to see the different flavours of firearms units as well. And you go into the City of London Police, which is a different flavour altogether. The variety is quite helpful as well.
I mean, I've got a few friends who are in the NHS, one's trying to be like mental health nurse and stuff like that. A lot of guys work with, the mental health side, from leaving the military, have gone into that. And most of them have said there's a big similarity between the NHS and the military in the way that it's run the hierarchies and stuff like that. Did you find that?
Well, one of my trademarks is I've not followed the normal pathway. The traditional model that people would expect is that nurses do the care, the doctors tell them how to do the care, and the doctors are in charge. I've developed a portfolio of activity and a training pathway where I now work equally as what a doctor would do.
Yeah.
So I have the same prescribing rights, the same capability in the pre-hospital setting than a pre-hospital doctor would. And to be the first nurse to be accredited as a consultant in pre-hospital emergency medicine is a legacy thing that I'll be very proud of until I drop into the grave. And I'm looking across at my portfolio over there, which is as thick as a Bible. That means that my approach to somebody who's in trouble in the pre-hospital setting will be measured as the same as the doctor would do it.
Right.
So this hierarchy that people perceive exists is now being eaten away at, and it's becoming a lot more multidisciplinary. And I think from my military background and experiences, I've pushed forward to move the boundaries forward, but it has come at a cost. There have been costs for pushing and being innovative. The system is very slow to change, and how can I put this? The old hierarchies still probably exist.
Yeah.
The doctors are always in charge. The good doctors are always equals to you. There are a lot of doctors out there who look down on you. They're becoming less and less now, but they still exist. And what I've been able to do is to shake that off and cut my own path, be innovative, and create an equality in my clinical practice to what they do.
I said that again. One of my old battery commanders, he left as a full colonel, and during COVID, he was volunteering for ambulance service, first off as a first responder and stuff like that, and now he's in charge of ambulance services in the West Country. And when I interviewed him, he was telling me that things are changing in the NHS. It's getting better, but there's still I don't want to call it the old guard, but it's slow to react. There's far too many levels, let's say. There's and people fight, push back, probably because they're worried about the jobs and stuff. I don't know. I'm not in that situation.
I would
can
agree.
imagine that's what it is.
Definitely. I would agree. There's still hierarchy, and I think one of the things that the Labour government will do is to take what I've done and rattle it across all sorts of domains.
Yeah.
To be innovative, to free up the capability. Nurses, paramedics have an enormous capability, latent capability that's not been tapped into yet. Nurses are a lot more ahead of the game when it comes to clinical practice than the paramedics are. Paramedics could do so much more. Nurses have been prescribing for years and for decades, and nurses have been doing procedures and working autonomously for decades. Paramedics are getting there now. And I think Wes Streeting and his gang will push that further for them, which is good. At the age of 60, I can't be arsed anymore with pushing. I've done enough, and I've got enough battle scars. But I can look back at the legacy stuff and be quite proud that it has actually helped the way things are now. So, I think people coming through the system should have an easier time than it used to be.
I mean, again, I'm quite lucky. We spoke before we started recording about my journey through counselling and how quick it happened. And I've spoke to guys on here who's it's took so long, and some of them are still fighting to get it. I'm lucky in the way that I live in Northumberland, or southeast Northumberland. Not many people live here, so we don't experience, I suppose, the waiting lists and the rigmarole and the hardships that people in inner cities or larger towns get. The waiting lists to get this, that, and the other, and the disparaged the NHS gets, a bad name type of thing. The ambulances take too long to come out and stuff like this. But you can only deal with what resources you've got.
Oh yeah.
Unfortunately, I've never had a bad word to say about the NHS ever. On everything that I've ever dealt with since I've left the army with them has been absolutely fantastic. The only thing I don't like about them is they've given me a CPAP machine for me sleep apnea, and I can't fucking sleep at the moment with it on. I've only
Well,
had it a
lose some timber, chap. That's what you need to do.
Well, yeah, I think I'll get my legs took off because it's easier. Yeah. I'm sat down. How can you tell? Just the fact that I've got sleep apnea. Yeah.
As you get older, you're empowered to choose to do the things that you want to do. When you're a young lad, you do the things that you think you need to do, and you do the things you think that people want you to do. So it's not quite the same.
Yeah.
As you get older, you think, actually, I don't need to do that. I'll do it for my reasons, or I'll stop doing this and just do what I like. And that's what I've been doing for the last year. I've had a major, absolute ruthless knife to my portfolio and chosen to do the things and surround myself with the right people. Going forward into my last third of life, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, that was my next question. What's in the future for you?
Well, having that root and branch reorganization was very empowering. Lots of things were happening, and I just had to pull the pin and say, "This has got to stop." The only way I was losing my military pride. I was losing what I was. I was losing what I felt was the good things that I could do.
Yeah.
It was all being eaten into by forces that I had no control over. When you don't have control of your external environment, you have to go back to your principles of going back, reorg, put the harbour area down, get your perimeter fence sorted out, dig in, scoff, brew,
yeah,
and then think about your clearing patrols, and in that order, secure the ground, get yourself safe, and then start about your battle plan. And that's what I've done for the last year. It hasn't been because of a health scare. It's all been about realizing that when you become busy and successful, there are people who hang on. And I think a lot of military guys out there get taken the piss out of because they're such hard workers. They're so diligent. Have a sense of duty and service that people take the piss out of it and use it and bleed it to their own aim. It's only when you realise that is the case that you can do something about it.
I think it's a valid point that probably a lot of guys who don't even realise they're experiencing that either.
No,
especially when they've only been out a few years and they're still finding the feet, and people are using them as progressing their own career. Flying on the wings of angels and stuff like that, riding on the backs of somebody. But but you don't appreciate it because you've come from an environment where you're all helping each other out anyway, because you are that. That. I mean, don't get me wrong; it does happen in the army as well. We always see people like, he talks the talk, but he can't walk the walk. And he knows how to bluff. And they go far, some of them, but they normally get found out in the end.
Yeah, they get found out.
Yeah, well, some do, some don't.
Yeah, but that's life, isn't it? But
yeah,
the bit about I said earlier when I was shocked at how people can lie.
Yeah,
so brutally in front of you and not bat an eyelid and have no moral injury that what they've just done. Sort of manifested when things were going wrong at the beginning of the year, because people I knew who I respected were in trouble, and one particular guy killed himself, and that was quite a difficult moment for all of us in the organisation. Yet the people who were giving me a hard time in another sphere were all of a sudden pretending to be very sympathetic and helpful when actually I knew it was a complete fucking lie. I had no trust in what they were doing. They were just saying it as a soundbite. And that's that military radar that we have. We can spot a bluffer. We can spot a Walt a mile away. And it's the same radar. And the only way I could deal with them was to cut them out. Because you can't negotiate with them. You can't, educate them. It's just how it's wired into them. So I just thought, right, the only way I can recenter what I do and get control of those external forces that are nibbling away at my core beliefs and all the rest of it is to get rid of them.
Best way to do it.
So I did it, and what a difference it's made to life.
A weight off the shoulders type of thing.
Well, yeah, it is, and it's realised how much time you invested in trying to manage these individuals, how to manage their impacts on your life, and how it took time away from you.
Yeah.
And I think when you get to this phase of life and you look out and you think, well, there's probably another 20 Christmases, potentially. There's probably another, everything's now got a number which feels a bit realistic. My children are all growing up. I can very easily quantify 20 years because I can think back 20 years what happened.
Yeah,
you think it's not long.
No, it's not.
And it's very sobering. And my only regret is I didn't do it when I was 50.
Yeah, I mean, it is weird that you say that, because I've had many thoughts like that recently myself. Not about cutting things out of my life or just stuff like that, but just you get to a certain age and you think there's a lot less in front of me now than it is behind.
Yeah.
And it is quite a sobering thing. And I wouldn't say I'm not scared of dying or whatever, but it's I don't lay awake at night worrying about it, type of thing. It's just you get on with it, don't you? You've got to enjoy what you've got left. Just don't try not to take things too seriously anymore.
See,
look after yourself in that.
One of my jobs, one of my roles over the last 20 years is to go out as a medical response to shootings, stabbings, big car crashes. So go out as a doctor, and I use that term just to show the capability. So I go out there as a medic, call sign Mike Delta 5. And when you go to these jobs and you see somebody your age spanked up a tree, hanging out of a bush, it's just a constant. We all have it in medicine. We all do it in our world. We have a constant reminder of the fragility of life. And I've been doing this for a long time, and there's not a lot I haven't seen. And I got to a point where I felt there needed to be a change, and it was a really interesting story about where it came from. And it was I was in Edinburgh. I was examining at the Royal College of Surgeons for the fellowship in immediate medical care. As a fellowship examiner, as a fellow, I would examine other doctors coming through that exam. And we have a nice meal in the hotel, and we all sit and chat, and it's a lovely social event. But then there's the exams over the next few days, which are quite brutal and hard for the people going through those processes. But in the downtime, we have a meal in the evening and we all chat. Well, I elected one evening to have a meal on my own with the Surgeon General, a lovely chap called Major General Tim Hodgetts. And I've known Tim since he was a captain. And I said to Tim, why don't we just go out for a meal tonight? Why don't we eat in the hotel and not go out? He went, that's a good idea. We'll do that. So we sat down and we were chatting. And we were just talking about old days and stuff that we used to get up to, people who we've met and people who've passed, and just reminiscing, really. And I just said to Tim, because Tim has done every tour of you can think of. He's been to Afghanistan multiple times, Kosovo, Iraq. He's been the main lead for medical practice within the military conflict for the last 20, 30 years. Okay, so he's been right up there. There's not anything he hasn't seen. And as a Surgeon General, he sits now. He's now just finished that job, but he was sitting at the top of the tree. He ran the ship. Okay, so there's not a lot he hasn't seen. Tim's a good old-fashioned emergency medicine consultant, and I said to him while we're having our meal, I said, "Tim, why aren't you working in emergency medicine anymore? Why aren't you doing it?" I was expecting some sort of academic leadership answer from him, and he just put his knife and fork down, looked out the window, turned to me and said, "Andy, I've seen enough carnage now. I've had enough." And when he said that to me, it resonated that, we have a capacity that to take on and help people, that if you see lots and lots of really, really bad stuff, you get to a point where I don't want to do it anymore.
Which is understandable.
I've got my badges, I've got my certificates, I've got my t-shirts, I've got the cap. I've done all the things. I don't have to prove to anybody anymore. And Tim was of that, thought. He said that's why they made the decision to go into leadership, not work in emergency medicine, which he was incredibly competent, had a flair for. He was a brilliant emergency physician doctor. But he'd had enough. So I think that started the fuse on the change for me.
Yeah.
And what I've done over the last year or so is sort of been quite ruthless in the things that I can cut out, do the things that I like to enjoy doing, and focus a lot on charity stuff that I do, which I quite like the charity stuff that I do that has no flag waving, no tins rattling, or or banners or anything. I just quietly work in the background and do the stuff that helps people. That's the sort of charity I like, and I think there's a lot of military people who like that.
There's quite a few out there like the flag waving as well, I must admit.
They do.
Good on them, if they,
Absolutely.
But it is, and it's a good thing, because it brings.
Can't do them down.
No, you can't do them down. I mean, I've spoken to plenty of people on this podcast who do amazing things for charity, and I'm in awe at them, to be honest. I mean, as you say, I carry a bit of timber, quite a lot. And I know, the podcast that comes out next week is Sally Orange's podcast, and I'd never heard of it, to be honest. Well, after I found out who she was and interviewed her, just an amazing, amazing person. And these people are out there. She runs marathons. She's got world records for running 7 marathons and on 7 continents in 7 days.
Wow.
Yeah, and she was a physiotherapist, reservist in the military. Suffered, horrendous. She won't mind me saying because she mentions it in the podcast. Depression and stuff like that, and kept it all to herself, and scared to tell the military in case she got sacked and this, that, and the other. But she does so much for charity now, and it's opened my eyes to people like that and the organisations and things that people are doing. Because of meeting her, I've now met other people, and it's like networking. And there's just the amount of people are out there that are just trying to help other people, whether it's just whether it's the veterans side of it or what, for firefighters, for police, for the NHS and stuff like that. And it's I'm in awe. I wouldn't know where to start, and I don't know if I've got the inclination or the go. I suppose that's one of the reasons I do this, really. Hoping that somebody listens to something that might get mentioned on one of the podcasts, and it helps them. It gets them to go and, I don't know, maybe go and seek help, or just gets them to think back, and I remember this, I remember that. And it makes them feel better. I hope that, I really do hope that nobody listens to any of these and thinks, oh shit, it makes them feel bad or remembers the bad things and causes, any down in, I can't even speak the words now. Causes them to do any harm to the self, let's say, or anything like that. So, I try to keep it all, I wouldn't say uplifted, because not everything is, life isn't like that. Not everyone's stories are good.
No, you have to have a nighttime before a daytime. So,
Yeah.
There's always going to be something dark that happens, but, it does get better. I know, lovely Tom during the pandemic, I always remember his phrase, tomorrow will be a better day, something like that.
Yeah.
That was his outlook on life. Despite how bad it was, tomorrow was going to be a better day. And, that was a very powerful thing for an old man to say. And it's true.
Yeah.
No matter how bad it is today, tomorrow will be better. I remember my grandma who got to 99 before she died during the pandemic. And grandma was my mum. As I said at the beginning, life was a bit chaotic, but grandma was my constant. So I was very close to grandma, and it'd be wrong for me not to mention her during this privilege to do a podcast. And I used to come home on leave, and she'd make cups of tea in china cups and biscuits and sandwiches. She'd be incredibly proud that her grandson was in the Parachute Regiment or now a nurse in the medical corps. The way to describe grandma, she's like hyacinth bouquet, okay, with bells on and a lot more well spoken. But that was grandma. And I used to come home on leave, and I'd have problems and anxieties and worries, and I'd sit down. We were talking about it, and she'd just tell me to just be quiet, Andrew. Right, answer this question. What were you worrying about last July? And I'd look at her like, so I don't know. She says, exactly.
Yeah.
And I've never forgotten that. And it's true. It is true. No matter how bad things are, it will get better. And we can thank Tom for making it more eloquently put by tomorrow will be a better day.
Yeah. And I think on that, because we're up nearly 2 hours.
What?
Yeah. It flies, doesn't it?
Get the editorial knife going. Load of crap.
No, I don't. You know what? I don't edit them.
Oh, you should do.
No. I like to try and keep them raw, if you know what I mean. If that's keep it real. Plus, I'm lazy. I think that's the real reason I don't edit them. Because when there's a conversation we've had tonight, it's flowed and it's been really interesting listening to you. It's the side of life and the military career and the NHS and stuff like that I didn't know about. I've not seen. And people who listen to this will be thinking, "Wow, I didn't know that." The stuff about Belize. All the stories I've heard of Belize are just people going out there getting pissed, or fighting monkeys and stuff like that. I'm not going into that one. But it's been absolutely amazing listening to your story and getting to understand, like I said, getting to understand the different aspect and the thoughts on things as well. The stuff about the firearms and the firearms teams, wouldn't have even known about it, wouldn't have thought about it. I'd like to say that I don't know you, so I can't really say I'm proud of what you've accomplished because I can't really be proud of something I don't know. But I am, for this brief time that we've met each other on this podcast, I have I wouldn't say I'm in awe of you, but if I'm shit with words, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really good to see where you started and where you've ended. I think that's a better way of saying it.
Frankie, you're very kind, very generous with what you just said, and all I would say is that, you play the long game, and you just plod on. Keep that diligence that all military people have of plodding on, marching forward, and all of a sudden you found yourself somewhere where you wouldn't have imagined you could ever get when you started off. That's just because you've had the long game as the plan. And my long game is coming to an end, and I can look back and think it's been really quite busy and something to be proud of. And for you to acknowledge that, Frankie, I appreciate it. So thank you for that.
Okay. Right, I'll say good night and I'll stop recording now. Again, thank you very much for coming on.
Dib.
Dub. Right, I'll stop the recording now.
All the best.